Yo, what's going on, everybody? This is Ori Styler from What Culture Comics, and today we're on the topic of brutality, or as Mortal Kombat would say, brutality. Comics wouldn't be quite as good if they didn't contain terrible, terrible things happening to wonderful people who definitely didn't deserve them. Nobody actively wants them to happen, of course, but they do set up for one of the more satisfying things to happen in media, when the person who has been put through hell finally gets their revenge. And the more dramatic, the better, as when a character you love is mistreated, the more ridiculous a comeuppance their enemy gets, the better. In a world where many awful folk do bad things and get away with them, it's almost too comforting to see a hero, or often an anti-hero, carry out an elaborate act of karma on a deserving individual or 12. Tales of vengeance are common in just about every type of media, but comics go the most intense with the details, and that's why it's the most fun to see. So sit back and relax with us here at What Culture Comics as we go through the 10 most brutal acts of revenge in comics history. Number 10, X-23 meets her makers. When your name is a series of numbers that denote a barcode more than a name with thought behind it, you know the person who has it hasn't been treated all that nicely. This is proved true when it comes to X-23, who was cloned from Wolverine and then treated about as well as Wolverine ever has been by scientists, which is to say pretty dang poorly. After being downright abused for the majority of her young life, it's understandable that when the time comes for her to get her revenge, she goes big. In particular, she goes especially intense when it comes to her reunion with Xander Rice, the man arguably responsible for the majority of her suffering. Understandably, taking out her long life frustrations results in Laura absolutely holding nothing back in her beatdown of the man, to the extent that the convenient countdown timer in the comic shows that she beats him for 10 straight minutes before feeling satisfied. To be fair though, he definitely deserved it. Number 9, Skurge rejects his friends and shoots a lot of them. It's easy to underestimate Skurge basically whenever you see him. Despite the fact the dude has gone toe to toe with the Hulk and not turned into mincemeat, he's often thrown in as a bit of an easy to beat moron, with even his supposed teammates and allies considering him a bit of dumb muscle. While you don't expect anything to come of it, it leads to some beautifully satisfying payoffs in The Mighty Thor, where Skurge finally has enough of being put down and deemed by those who are supposed to be there for him. And so, he decides to stand in Thor's place when the hero goes to guard the gates of hell from his encroaching villain pals. Even cooler yet, he knocks Thor out to do so, implying he maybe could have taken the God of Thunder out this whole time if he'd actually been putting his heart into it. We'll never know, will we? Number 8, Molecule Man break up with Dr. Doom. Molecule Man gets a rough time of it, to say the absolute least, in the 2015 Secret Wars storyline. After witnessing basically the destruction of the world, poor guy watched various alternate universe versions of himself getting blown up to rescue the fragments of the universe left intact, and then had to exist as basically a human battery so that Dr. Doom could be the tyrannical ruler of the remaining land. While Owen doesn't seem too annoyed about this because he's a surprisingly chill dude for someone who can be a literal bomb, the fact that Dr. Doom doesn't feed him or seemingly have any nice interaction with him clearly leaves its mark. Growing tired of this weird setup, Molecule Man turns on Doom, basically the minute he's able to, reducing the ruler of Battleworld's powers to be low enough that Mr. Fantastic is able to have a good old-fashioned beatdown with him. See? Should've given him fries, that's all I'm saying. Number 7, Robin wears a new mantle. If you had to describe The Dark Knight Strikes Again as quickly as possible, it'd be like this. It's not a happy book. That's it. It takes all the misery and grim tone of the previous work in the series The Dark Knight Returns and amps it up to 11 just to see if it can make you feel any sadder. This is likely the main motivation behind having the first Robin, Dick Grayson, go through the dark transformation that we see in the story. Having been fired by Batman in this universe, Grayson grows bitter towards his former mentor, and this leads him to take on the alias of the Joker, something that obviously is deeply troubling to old Bats when he discovers who is behind the green hair. It's brutal, sure, but it's undeniably the best revenge act the former Robin could have managed, without even having to get directly physical, by simply going from the Dark Knight sidekick to arch enemy. Number 6, V beats the system, V for Vendetta. For anyone who wasn't paying attention, V for Vendetta is basically the story of V getting his revenge on those who subjected him to inhumane experimental treatments and then going on to topple the dystopian government that had initially orchestrated these awful camps where minorities were treated like lab rats. On one level, this revenge feels strangely disappointing as it becomes clear that V isn't just wiping these people out because of spite, but rather in order that everyone who knew his initial identity dies, as we never see who the vigilante is behind the Guy Fawkes mask, meaning it's not solely done in the spirit of vengeance. Now, this isn't to say that the character almost single-handedly managing to destroy the corrupt government that had formed in the aftermath of a nuclear war wasn't deeply satisfying, because it was. But another more profound feeling of gratitude comes in a detail that has been picked up by ardent fans. After orchestrating the death of the unscrupulous Mr. Almond, V tells Evie that he has a rose picked out for the leader of the state, which he does in the form of Almond's wife, Rosemary Almond. While we don't know it at the time, V has the ability to break into the computer system used by the government and uses it to do things like disable Rose's credit cards, leaving her at the mercy of the merciless system. This eventually leads to her shooting said leader, Mr. Susan, with it heavily being implied this was V's plan from the start. And a very impressive one to keep almost totally in the background. Number 5, Jason Todd kills the Joker, the 3 Jokers. Over the years, there have been a lot of fake outs as to Jason finally getting his revenge on the man that killed him, since one of the few suitable deaths for the clown would have been one via Todd, even though DC would never permanently kill their star villain. This actually pays off in the 3 Jokers, as one of the Jokers helpfully mentions to Jason that he's the same clown who offed the former Robin, which goes down about as well as you might imagine. In fact, it maybe goes down worse as Jason shoots this Joker at point blank range at the nearest opportunity. Dark, brutal, but I understand. Number 4, Frank meets the Slavers. Given the Punisher is a man who would ruthlessly kill you for jaywalking or even littering most of the time, it's not exactly surprising that when he meets criminals who have done legitimately awful things, he scales up his punishments accordingly. So when Frank discovers a group who sell women as sex slaves and who have killed a woman's child so she's too scared to tell the police about their crimes, you can kind of tell how well it's going to go for them. So well that it leads to 3 of Frank's most brutal executions, in fact. In the first, the Punisher captures one of the slavers, knocks him out, and then lets him wake up to discover the anti-hero has wrapped his intestines around a tree and then leaves him there. In the second, he hunts down the other individual largely responsible for these awful deeds and attempts to throw her through a glass window. When it turns out the glass is reinforced, Frank merely decides to beat her head in using it until the pane itself pops out entirely. Finally, he burns the ringleader alive and records it as a fun little memo to send to the rest of the people involved. And you've got a pretty clear sign why people try and avoid getting into Punisher's bad books. Number 3, the Midnighter misuses a jackhammer. Having a plot feature around a hero's significant other being mistreated and them going on the warpath to get revenge for said partner is pretty common. Usually though, the partner in question is not also a superhero, and the one doing the avenging doesn't do so by sodomizing their enemy with a jackhammer. This is the exact circumstances of Midnighter's revenge over the Commander after the man sexually assaulted the Vigilante's husband. Given it's not as though the Midnighter does anything in halves anyways, the Commander's grim fate to some sort of Saw-like revenge plan was more or less set in stone the minute the Batman-esque anti-hero found out about this. Number 2, Hawkeye escapes jail, The Ultimates. The Ultimate series is so over the top that moments that would have been absolutely mind-shattering in the regular series don't even warrant a response when you read them in this universe. And thus you find yourself wondering if anything actually will manage to still feel interesting and exciting in this world that's almost too stuffed with drama and action. Anything in this case arrives in the form of Hawkeye escaping capture, which has the Avenger, often considered the dorkiest, pull out some moves right out of a John Wick film. Because in order to break out, Hawkeye tears out his own fingernails in order to use them as projectiles in the escape attempt. It's exactly as terrifying and cool as this suggests. The only shame being that Hawkeye's coolest ever moment isn't in the main universe. And number 1, Logan and MATSU'O have their yearly reunion. When it comes to heroes who like their revenge, Wolverine is likely the top of the proverbial list. He's killed thousands of people in the name of avenging innocence. One of the most terrifying acts of revenge Wolverine has carried out, though, was actually non-lethal, and yet in many ways worse than just being offed. because when it comes to MATSU'O, the man who killed Logan's romantic interest Mariko, the gruff Canadian seemed to think death was too good for him. As such, instead of killing him, Logan would arrive once a year at wherever the man was hiding and would cut a portion of his body off. It's exactly as brutal as it sounds, and by the time we see the impact of this, the man has lost a huge portion of his body, despite the fact Wolverine appears to have been cutting off relatively small chunks each year, making this even more terrifying than his berserker rages. And that is the list of the 10 most brutal acts of revenge in comics history. Did I miss any that you can remember as being really brutal? Well, let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to What Culture Comics for more great content like this. My name is Ori Styler with the A at the beginning and the end, and I'll catch you in the next video. Take it easy.